Hello there. This is MD. Here with you on SaskiYano. Here we go again. We are in a new After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial, you will see exactly how shape layers work. Shape layers are super powerful tools for creating graphics and much more inside of After Effects. I'm gonna pick up right where I left off in the last tutorial. And you are going to learn more about what shape layers can do. So let's look at a few other things you may want to explore with shape layers. Some things that I find pretty useful. I'm gonna get rid of this shape right here. Then I just going to create a basic shape with the pen tool. Maybe a line. I'm gonna hold shift as a create that second vertex. And that'll make the second point here be at 90 degrees. You can also hold shift and create points at 45 degrees. Or you can move them a little bit more freeform. I am going to get rid of this fill. I'm gonna change the stroke to something a little bit beefier. And then I'm gonna show you some of the options you have right down here in the shape layer. We have this little add fly out. And one thing you'll see it used a lot with shape layers is an effect called trim paths. With trim paths, you can do things like animate this line on by animating the end value or the start value or combination of both. Or, if you want to make something that's sort of oscillated around your shape, you can animate this offset here. And it may be like that with more of a round cap. You can do that right there. Maybe want these corners to be a little bit more rounded. You can do that right there. And now you can animate something like this offset. And I can start to see the potential for the shape layers. You can use it to make all kinds of cool lines and shapes and patterns. I'm just gonna reset all of these values here. We could do something like make this drop on by setting the end value to 0%. Moving down a little bit. And then setting the end value to 100%. Something as simple as that. Very useful for a lot of different things. And I want to get rid of the trim path for now. And let's look at another one of these modifiers. How about the wiggle paths? By default, if you just apply the wiggle path and then preview, you can kind of see what this is going to do is use this a bit of randomness on the actual path to change the path's shape. You can see this in more detail if you crank up the size. Nope, turn down the stroke here. This is the type of modifier that animates over time. I didn't add any keyframes, but if I preview this, you can see it's moving all on its own. That's because there is a wiggles per second parameter here. And you can set this up or down, or you can set it to something like 0 if you don't want it to be wiggled over time at all. And you just want to use the wiggle to change the shape in somewhat of a controllable way. Or you can animate something like the temporal phase and get something slightly different and have more control over what's going on with your line here. Just another option. There's also something called zigzag, which is similar to the wiggle, except that it doesn't wiggle over time. And it's much more symmetrical. This is something that you may be able to see a little bit better. If we change the shape a little bit, with the pen tool selected, if I select only 2 points, you can see that these vertexes are selected because they are filled in solid blue, and the other vertex are not selected because they are empty. With 2 points selected, I can right-click on them, choose Mask and Path Shape, and then uncheck Closed. That will make an open path. Then I can select these points individually. I can delete them. If I hold down Ctrl, I get a selection tool. And I can draw a selection around several points. And I delete those. I can take this one vertex or point here that I have left, then just click away and just make a line. With a line, if you just want to keep this a line, you just have to be careful not to close it. You see, if I hover over the pen tool over the other end with the other vertex that is not selected, it changes the tool. And if I click on it again, it will close this path, which is something that I don't want to. I just want to keep this a line or an open path with 2 points. Yes, I know I can come down here to the zigzag. I can create some nice symmetrical zigs and zags, or you can change this to smooth and create a really nice looking sine wave looking shape here. Let me show you another one of these modifiers that I like, called repeater. Repeater does well sort of what you would expect. It takes your shape and it repeats it. We get some options here. We have number of copies. You can crank that up. You get offset, which you can control sort of where the repeats are starting from. Or in other words, you can create repeats on the other side of your object. And you have transform repeater down here. In this controls the transformation of those repetitions. So right now, the only thing that has been modified is the X value. You can change the Y value. You can change the rotation, which will create a whole kind of really crazy looking stuff. If you position this dead center in your comp, you set the position to 0, 0. And then you change the rotation. And I modify the offset. We can set this as something like 36 and then 10, which will evenly divide those 36 repetitions over 360 degrees. Circle. You can create some really nice looking shapes. I'm just going to leave the shape and show you a few more options here. I'm gonna create a rectangle. And I'll turn on the fill. Make it something bright. That's pretty gross. Immediately after you create a shape, if you switch back to the selection tool, you can actually position your shape without affecting the layer's position. Another way you can do that is with your layer selected. If you hold Ctrl and click, you can select that individual shape. Then you can reposition this. Or you can modify the scale without actually affecting the layer's transform controls. So you can see, if I select this shape here, I can move it around. And the layer's transform controls are not affected. That's because I am affecting the rectangle's transform controls. See, the position moves when I reposition this. There's some other things that you may want to explore with shape layers. Things like rounded corners. And that's useful for if you create a shape. Well, a rectangle set a great example, because you can already round the corners of rectangle. But if you create a more complex shape, say we took this path here, right-click on it, and choose Convert to Bezier Path, which you can only do in one direction. Now, this rectangle is a path, so I can modify it with the pen tool. And you can see even though I'm creating vertexes with no curve on them, the end result is a nice curvy shape. Because I have these round corners modifier on here. See that? There's another one here you might find useful, called offset paths. And then you can use to sort of increase or decrease the path size smoothly. You also may want to experiment with the stacking order of any one of these factors or modifiers here, because it will change the end result. So, watch what happens when I put rounded corners above the offset paths. You see, it looks different. You can come up with a lot of different looks and a lot of uses for the shape layers by using these modifiers, by animating different properties, and by changing the stacking order of these modifiers or factors here to get different results. So, I've really only scratched the surface of what shape layers can do. Has a lot more to explore. And I'm gonna leave that ball in your court. For now, it's time to move on to the next tutorial. We're gonna learn about some text basics. Check that out. Finally, we are done for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave your comment down below in the comments section. Also, if you want to learn more, take a look at our first channel, Everything PS. See you next time. Bye.